It was the most fearsome machine ever built. It was also useless the day it was finished. 188 tons of steel. No tank before it or since has come close. It could shrug off any shell fired at it from the front. Its main gun could destroy an enemy tank from over 2 miles away, before that enemy tank even knew it was there. On paper, it was unstoppable, a machine so overbuilt that nothing on the battlefield could touch it. In practice, it never fired a single shot in anger. Not one. And the reason why says more about how wars are actually won than any battle ever could. This is the story of a weapon that was engineered to perfection and still lost, before it even reached the fight. This is the Maus, German for mouse, a name that got darker and more sarcastic the longer the project dragged on, because there was nothing small about it. To understand what 188 tons actually means, you have to put it next to something familiar. Stand it next to a house, and it's taller than the roofline. Put it next to the most common tank of the Second World War, the American Sherman, and the Sherman looks almost like a toy beside it. The Sherman weighed around 30 tons. The Maus outweighed it more than 6 times over. Line up 6 Shermans end to end, stack their combined weight, and you're still not quite at what one single Maus weighed. This scale wasn't an accident of engineering ambition. It was a demand handed down from the very top. Hitler had a personal fixation on size, on machines that were bigger, heavier, more powerful than anything the enemy could possibly field. He'd seen how Germany's early successes came from speed and coordination, but by the middle of the war, with the tide turning and resources shrinking, his instinct changed. If Germany couldn't outproduce the Allies, couldn't win a war of sheer numbers, then maybe it could win a war of scale instead. One tank so massive, so heavily armored, so overwhelming in raw power, that a mere handful of them could turn an entire battle by themselves. It's an intoxicating idea. One machine, so far beyond anything the enemy has, that it doesn't matter how many tanks they send against it. And once that idea took hold at the top of the German war machine, engineers weren't asked whether it was a good idea. They were asked to make it real. Here's the problem nobody in that meeting room seemed to fully reckon with. At 188 tons, almost nothing that existed to support a vehicle could actually support the Maus. Start with bridges. Most bridges in Europe, sturdy, reliable, built to carry trucks, tanks, artillery, were rated for a fraction of that weight. The Maus would have collapsed nearly every bridge it tried to cross. Roads weren't much better. Even solid paved roads could crack and buckle under a weight like that, and most of the terrain a tank actually has to cross in wartime isn't paved road at all. It's open field, farmland, forest track. Soft ground. And soft ground was the Maus's real enemy. A tank that heavy would sink into mud that a normal vehicle would roll straight through without noticing. Rain became a tactical threat. A single wet field could trap the most powerful tank in the world like a fly in amber. So how do you move something that can't reliably cross a bridge and can't reliably cross soft ground? The engineers' answer to part of that problem was almost absurd in its ambition. They designed the Maus to ford rivers by driving straight along the riverbed itself, fully submerged, sealed watertight like a submarine, with a long snorkel tube poking above the surface so the engine could breathe and the crew wouldn't suffocate. Think about what that actually means. A land vehicle, the whole point of a tank, engineered to become, temporarily, an underwater vehicle, just to get across a stream that a jeep would splash through in 3 seconds without the driver even lifting his foot off the pedal. Then there was the matter of actually moving the thing forward. Nothing in Germany's arsenal was powerful enough to push 188 tons at any real speed. The engine that finally went into the Maus gave it a top speed of around 13 miles per hour on a good, flat road, and considerably slower than that anywhere else. 13 miles per hour. A machine built to dominate the battlefield could be outpaced by a man jogging at an easy stride. In the time it took a Maus to travel a single mile, a more agile enemy tank could reposition twice, flank it, or simply retreat somewhere the Maus could never physically follow. And here's the deeper trap hiding inside all of this. Every fix created a new problem, and every new problem demanded another fix. The armor that made the Maus nearly invincible from the front made it enormously heavy. The weight that made it theoretically unstoppable made it barely able to move. The engine built to push that weight guzzled fuel at a rate that made any kind of sustained operation a logistical nightmare. In a war Germany was already losing on fuel supply. Solve one engineering problem, and you've made 3 others worse. It's a spiral, and the mouse never escaped it. A tank that can dominate any battle it reaches, but can't reliably reach a battle, isn't really a weapon in any meaningful sense. It's a monument to what engineering can achieve when nobody stops to ask whether it should. Here's what makes the mouse more than just an odd footnote. It wasn't a one-off mistake made by one overambitious general. It was a pattern that ran through Germany's entire wartime approach to weapons. Time and again, German military planners looked at a weapon that wasn't proving decisive enough and reached for the same lever: make it bigger. Tanks not breaking through fast enough? Build a heavier tank with thicker armor. Rockets not doing enough damage? Build a bigger rocket. It shows up again and again. This instinct that whatever problem you're facing, scale is the answer. And the mouse wasn't even the end point of that instinct. It was a stepping stone. After it, German engineers seriously drafted plans for something even more extreme. A proposed 1,000-ton land vehicle nicknamed the Rat, literally the Rat. It never advanced past blueprints and a handful of early design studies, but the fact that it was taken seriously at all, that resources and engineering hours were spent even sketching it out, tells you how deeply this belief had rooted itself. There was always, somewhere in the pipeline, a bigger version that would finally, definitely, be the war-winning machine. It's the technological equivalent of doubling down at the table because the next hand is bound to turn things around. Now put that next to what the other side was doing with the exact same wartime pressures, the exact same shortages of time, money, and steel. The Allies weren't chasing a single perfect machine at all. They were chasing simplicity, reliability, and volume. The clearest example of this philosophy in action is something almost embarrassingly humble compared to a 188-ton supertank, the American Jeep. A cheap, simple, mechanically straightforward vehicle that could be manufactured by the tens of thousands, shipped anywhere in the world, and repaired in a field by an ordinary mechanic with a basic toolkit and spare parts pulled from another broken Jeep sitting nearby. It wasn't trying to be the best vehicle anyone had ever built. It wasn't trying to awe anyone. It was trying to be everywhere, all the time, in the hands of every unit that needed one, showing up again and again no matter how many were lost. Lay those two approaches side by side and the contrast is almost total. One side was pouring its finite steel, fuel, and engineering talent into a handful of god machines, each one a masterpiece, each one a nightmare to actually deploy. The other side was flooding the battlefield with good enough machines that simply never stopped coming, no matter how many were destroyed the day before. The failure sat somewhere upstream of any of that, in the thinking that produced the blueprints in the first place. It was the belief that a war could be won by one overwhelming machine, one masterpiece of engineering so far beyond anything the enemy had that sheer superiority alone would decide the outcome. That belief sounds intuitive. It even sounds like common sense. Of course, the more powerful weapon wins. But wars aren't decided in a single duel between two machines. They are decided by whether an army can show up, again and again, in enough places, in enough numbers, for long enough to matter. A weapon that can win any single engagement but can't reach most engagements has already lost the war, no matter what its spec sheet says. The war wasn't won by the biggest tank. It was won by the millions of small ones.